Stop it! Stop it! Ah!
Got it. All right, well, hello and welcome again to another episode of Mike Takes the Mic, where I ask your questions to Headmaster Christopher Dyer of Reborn Martial Arts here in Springfield, Virginia, Northern Virginia. And so today's question is, perhaps a little opinionated. So initially, the question I have for you is, what are your opinions on weapons? And I know we've touched on this a little bit. You've referenced, you've done HIMA, which is Historical European Martial Arts, which is heavily tasked with weapons training and even weapons sparring. Mm-hmm. You frequently allude to your interest in sword work and swords themselves. I'd have to say weapons are of interest to me, but I'm much more kind of a modern day martial artist. There's very little likelihood that I'll be walking down the street with a sword or nunchucks or really too many martial arts weapons. So what is your feeling on the subject?
That you should walk around the streets with swords more often. I think that the world needs that. Needs more of that.
I don't think my rap sheet needs that.
Yeah, so my background, first of all, in the weapons, like you alluded to, before HIMA, I've talked about this before, I ran a couple dojos, oversaw the training of the instructors at a number of schools, and was kind of known as the weapons guy. I loved weapons forms, just something about it. I was a kid of the 80s and 90s. I mean, there was, He-Man and
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
TMNT. I had to learn all of the weapons, and of course, Luke Skywalker. That flip off the comes up with the lightsaber at the. That was it. So, obviously, growing up, I loved weapons, and some of the earliest photos of me, I have a bow staff in hand, just doing nonsense in my backyard. Absolutely loved it. But later on, when I started my actual real training, it was, that sort of thing spoke to me, is that it was an extension. We always talk about this. The weapon should be an extension of the body. But for me, I don't know what it was, but I understood the movements. And when I do weapons forms, I actually am focusing on what am I actually doing here. I'm not just going through the movements, but I'm actually putting them into use against, whatever visual things that are going on. Later on, going into the HIMA world, actually studying historical weapons fighting, and as you said, heavy combat with weapons, full protective armor, but real 4-foot long steel swords being swung at full speed with takedowns and throws and all this other stuff. It got pretty intense a lot of times. And so actually learning to do that in real time, full speed, full contact. If you miss the point, pun intended, you got hit, and you got hit hard, right? So that was one of the biggest eye-openers for me, was the need for speed, the need for distance, the need for footwork, the need for understanding lines of control, right? So we talk about this in our studio now, is guards set up the attack that's going to come in. The whole principle that I talk about, where your hands are, setting up what's going to come in, that comes 100% from sword work. It's something I never understood until I started learning invites from doing sword work. And so the sword heavily influenced my martial arts training. And we know, going back in history, martial arts were all heavily influenced by weapons. Xingyi, one of the things that we study here, heavily influenced by spear work. It's believed that spear work was actually the foundation for Xingyi. Early pugilism, pre-boxing gloves boxing, bare knuckle boxing, heavily influenced by sword work. The terminology. Terminology, parries, straight blows, and jabs, and all these things are all terminology, and the footwork, the hand positioning is all straight out of early sword work. And so we know that the movements that come from sword or spear or stick or whatever, they train your body how to move, and they make it more clear about lines of attack. And then as I study more and more sword and spear and stick work and whatnot, and I train different weapons, I always go back to, for me as a martial artist, one of the most important things is the spiritual aspect of it, and something that I don't talk a lot with my students about, not as much as I would like to, but there is more to the martial arts than punching and kicking and throwing people and all that fun stuff. It's the growth that can come from it, the internal or self-cultivation that can come from the martial arts, that holding that weapon as a representation of who you are on the outside, how you wield your weapon, and how you control yourself in a simulated combat, but in combat. Like when a person's coming at you, there is that fear. When someone has a 4-foot-long steel sword and they're swinging at your head, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel that intensity, that fear that you have to overcome. Sometimes when a judge says go, and there's a big dude, I've had to spar people twice my size with really big weapons, and it's terrifying. But you get in there, you know your angles, you know your lines of defense, you know your movements, you have trained your butt off, and you win. Like, it's an amazing thing. I can't tell you what it does to a person's self-confidence to be able to wield a weapon well, and then that carries over into other things that you do.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is your work with weapons really, not only does it kind of amplify or magnify, and also kind of puts a fine microscope on your technique, but it also informs empty hand technique.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the old masters, the people who created martial arts techniques long ago knew this, is that if things get really bad, go south, I'm not going to be going to my fists right away. It's like people have always had to deal with weapons, right? It's just the sad state of the world is when things turn sideways, we rarely talk to each other. It usually turns to violence, right? That's just the nature of humanity. And knowing how to handle them, it does a strange thing. The most peaceful people I've met in the world are the ones that can handle themselves. That's, with their fists or with weapons or whatever it happens to be, is when you've trained to a level where you do not fear other people, when you've overcome that fear and you have that internal strength, you no longer have to be a jerk to people, right? You can be kind.
Yeah, when you have nothing to prove, really.
Yeah, yeah. It's the talk softly but carry a big stick. I think it works both ways. You carry a big stick if you know how to use that. You can talk softly. You don't have to try and intimidate people through mannerisms and bravado and all this other stuff. You can become humble, and it works. It constantly is building on itself. Is that humility goes into your training makes you more humble, which is, it's a very strange, very interesting thing.
Interesting. Also, the more you train, sometimes it's also the more you feel you don't know what, the more you train, the more you understand how big everything is, and how you only understand, your corner that you've been training in.
Yeah, and this is why, I've talked about this in other videos, of don't go into the blinders, right? If you only ever study small sword and someone comes out with a great sword and starts, trying to take off your head, and your strategy is going to fall apart, because that mindset is designed against only using it against a duel with a person with the equivalent weaponry. So having experienced different things, as you understand, is like, sometimes I don't have all the tools. I'm going to make what I have work, but you still have to, again, going back to being humbled, a weapon will quickly humble you. Yeah.
Especially anything heavy or pointy, I would imagine.
Yeah, getting whacked really hard is a humbling experience.
Well, it's been eye-opening experience for us. Thanks so much for your thoughts. Any parting wisdom?
No, I think that weapons training, a lot of people, as you pointed out, in modern day, don't really see the point. And I think that maybe the point is we get so caught up in our modern day, like maybe put the phone down, put the computer down. Like we talk about, people watch people sword fighting on movies and stuff, but then you tell them to go and train with a sword, and why? Because it's cool, first of all. And I think there is something that we connect to. It's just part of our cultural, I don't know how you describe it, but when you hold that weapon, I've seen this with so many people over the years, you let a person hold the sword for the first time, and the smile happens, they start moving around, and all of a sudden their internal kid Jedi comes out, and then and that is an open gate to start learning. And
the cardboard tube lightsaber, huh?
It opens doors. It opens blast doors, yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So for the record, I'm not anti-weapon, I'm just modern weapon-ish.
Yeah.
Things that you may carry with you. But again, thanks for all your thoughts, and thanks for stopping by and checking us out here at Reborn Martial Arts. Please like and subscribe. If you'd like to make any comments, have any commentary, please put those in the comments section. And so thanks again. Until next time, this has been Mike Takes the Mic. Thanks a lot. Bye.